So people seem to appreciate the double review last week, so I figured screw it, let's run it back one more time. So there will be a black bag review towards the end of this video, but before that we need to tackle Netflix and the Russo brothers' recent efforts, that being The Electric State. A movie that reportedly cost $320 million to make. I think it's time we have a conversation about the Russo brothers as directors, as well as the current state of Netflix original films. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
Before I get started, I'd like to kindly ask you hit the like button, and please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.
Come on. Do it. Do it!
After a devastating car accident during the war claims her parents' lives, Michelle is led to believe that her younger brother Christopher passed away. However, upon rediscovering clues suggesting that Chris might still be alive, she sets out across a dystopian landscape to find him. Now, this is going to be an uncomfortable conversation for some of you who are still moved by what the Russo brothers gave you in the MCU. But I do think it's time for us to consider that these guys are not the genius filmmakers that some people seem to think that they are.
Boo this man!
The truth is that everything that they've done post-Endgame has come and gone without so much as anything that resembles legitimate buzz. I mean, their first mistake was partnering up with Netflix, who, let's face it, hasn't put out a decent original movie in a long time, maybe ever. Netflix is never going to beat they greenlight everything allegations, especially if you continue to put out big budget blockbusters that absolutely nobody gives a shit about. From almost the moment they are released, they are lost in a sea of mediocre content never to be talked about again. That's why I cannot buy into the idea that streaming is exclusively the way of the future when Netflix consistently puts out garbage like this. Once again, just because a movie is convenient to watch doesn't mean that it's good. As far as the Russo brothers go, we have to at least consider the possibility that they greatly benefited from jumping into a universe that was already established, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Because when they have to build something from the ground up, the results are less than impressive. Let me put it this way, at this point, knowing what we know now, if someone else directed Infinity War and Endgame, I'm not entirely sure the results would have been all that much different. There is absolutely nothing recognizable or interesting about the way that the Russo brothers tell stories. You could not watch a movie without having any knowledge of it and come to the conclusion that you are watching a Russo brothers movie. There is absolutely nothing distinguishable about their work, and that is on full display in a movie like The Electric State, something that is about as generic as you can possibly get. I've said this in movie reviews before, but it's never going to be more true than it is with this movie. There is nothing contained within this that we haven't seen before already and done better in another movie.
Something very familiar about all this.
It wants you to believe that it's this highly emotional story at its core about family. But ironically, it comes off more like a hollowed out robot built on an assembly line. If someone told me that the script for this movie was written by AI, that would not surprise me at all. Especially considering it very obviously takes a lot of elements from other movies and some very on-the-nose 90s pop culture references and kind of mashes them together in this hodgepodge of a movie. I don't know where the $320 million budget for this movie went. I guess to the visuals? But if you are spending that kind of money on visuals, that better be life-changing, and guess what? It wasn't. In fact, nothing really jumped off the screen to me at all. The visuals, kind of like the plot itself, just kind of lumbers along in the most uninspired way possible. This movie has an all-star cast made up of MCU holdovers like Chris Pratt and Anthony Mackie. It also has respected actors in the game like Stanley Tucci, Giancarlo Esposito, and Woody Harrelson. And yet, even with all that talent, they could not give them the appropriate material to be able to sink their teeth into. Now, I don't know if Chris Pratt lost a bet or he's being blacklisted from being in real movies because he goes to church. But my God, this guy felt like he was going to be one of the biggest stars in the world at one time. I liked him. I thought he was very charismatic. But he has slowly crept into the Ryan Reynolds territory, where he's basically playing a different variation of the same character in every single movie. And his performance in The Electric State is very representative of that. Because I don't feel the passion, it feels like he was doing it for a paycheck, it feels like he was just going through the motions.
I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know I'm doing it really, really well.
And then we have Millie Bobby Brown, who, let's be honest, hasn't exactly lit the world on fire post Stranger Things. It's a shame because I do feel like she has potential as an actress, but she just keeps getting stuck with the worst projects. Maybe she should care just a little bit more about the history of cinema and the art form overall, because it might give her a good inclination of what she shouldn't do. She tries her hardest to make us care about what's going on, but at the end of the day, there just wasn't much to care about. Oh, and for those who are keeping track, this is the second movie of the year where Giancarlo Esposito is basically playing a glorified henchman. The truth is that there's actually some pretty decent ideas in here somewhere, and a fair amount of world building, and if they just spent a little bit more time developing those concepts, they might have actually been onto something. A human-robot conflict where the robots want their freedom to do as they please is not something that we haven't seen before. And I'm not entirely sure there's a ton of meat left on that bone when it comes to that overused trope. But also, a little bit of effort would have gone a long way. Instead of making us feel invested in that conflict, we just kind of get the Cliff Notes version of it, and it's just not effective. Even the whole sister-brother dynamic that the entire film hangs on feels kind of phoned in. I mean, in a normal situation, that kind of stuff is pretty much a slam dunk if you apply yourself. Instead, what we got is just another streaming movie that you will probably forget about 2 minutes after you're done watching it. Actually, that might be generous. You might start forgetting about it as you're watching it, as this way too long 2-hour plus runtime pretty much squeezes all the optimism out of you 1 minute at a time. The Electric State is not the worst movie I've seen this year, but it's definitely on the lower end of things, and about as unfulfilling as a movie can get, and that's why I'm going to give it the Angry Rocky.
That's right, it stinks!
So Black Bag just so happens to be one of those rare movies where I'm willing to admit that it's well made, but I also have to be honest and say I wasn't all that entertained by it. I understand nuanced opinions is a foreign concept to some, but you are talking to a guy who literally gave Citizen Kane a careless Sam Gerard. Bottom line being, it's okay to give a movie props, while also admitting that it's not for you. Black Bag follows intelligence agent George Woodhouse, who faces the ultimate test when his beloved wife is suspected of betraying the nation. Loyalty to his marriage and his country will be tested. So shout out to director Steven Soderbergh, who managed to drop 2 well-made movies this year already, and we're only in March. He had the movie Presence earlier this year, which is easily one of my favorites of the year so far. And now he has Black Bag, an espionage thriller written by David Cope and starring Michael Fassbender and Cate Blanchett. This movie sounded like it had all the makings of something that would be entertaining to me, at the very least on a pure storytelling level.
That makes sense.
And listen, this movie is well written, it's well acted, it's well directed. But in some cases, even that's not enough. This movie is smart, but it's almost too smart for its own good. And that level of over-sophistication ended up making me feel kind of bored while watching it at different times throughout it. And I know I'm going to catch hell for this, but it did remind me of the Bourne movies just a little bit at certain points. Movies that I've seen once and appreciate them to a certain degree, but have absolutely no desire to ever watch again. The truth is that the complex nature in which this plot unfolds, as well as how the dialogue is delivered, can make parts of it hard to digest. And if you are expecting any kind of action sequences, I'm here to tell you that it's not that kind of spy movie. It's more of a thinking man spy movie, which is great if that's what you are looking for in that moment. And I just wasn't, and I'd be remiss if I didn't admit that my own personal preferences as a film fan kind of got in the way and made me not enjoy this movie as much as I could have. This movie is surprisingly just as much about having relationships with people, being a secret agent, as it is all of the agent stuff. It very much explores the dynamic of dating or marrying someone who is literally trained to be deceitful, to lie, and to kill. Which in a vacuum does sound like an interesting concept. There's one scene early in the movie that's basically a dinner party with all of these spy type people attending. And what starts out as kind of a fun get together kinda devolves into Michael Fassbender's character using his manipulative spy tactics to analyze the people at the dinner party and ultimately drive wedges in between them. I mean, we all have that friend who likes to stir shit up between people. Now imagine if that person was a secret agent as well, on a mission to uncover the truth. Listen, Michael Fassbender, as always, is great. I feel like the guy never really reached the heights of a megastar that he is truly capable of being. And I'm also not entirely sure how he's never played James Bond. I mean, everything about him screams that he is literally built for it. I guess we'll have to settle for him doing one-off spy thrillers instead. His character is kind of awkward and yet highly skilled in his craft, and Michael Fassbender sells us on that character perfectly. He is very believable in the role.
Perfection.
A former Bond actor just so happens to be in this movie as well, and when you say James Bond, being a child of the 90s, my mind instantly goes to Pierce Brosnan. Yes, he is a character in this movie, but if I'm being completely honest, I was kind of disappointed at how little he was actually in it. When it was all said and done, his skills felt very underutilized in a movie that would seemingly be perfect for him. As far as Cate Blanchett goes, it's nice to see her doing something again that is more appropriate for her skill level. I did not enjoy seeing her lower herself to the Borderlands movie just last year. I felt like actress Marissa Abella was also a standout of this film. She had this perfect balance of naiveness in certain situations and a kind of take charge attitude in other situations.
Because she got a great ass!
As far as the plot goes, yes, at its core, this movie is about a super secret spy MacGuffin getting stolen, which leads everyone involved to believe that there is in fact a rat in the house. And I do think that the movie did a decent job of misdirecting the audience and keeping everyone guessing as to who that rat is. There was this one polygraph scene where the questions and answers consistently open up more and more possibilities about who the traitor is, as well as helping to build toward the inevitable reveal. All that being considered, some of the relationship stuff in the movie at times made me forget I was watching a spy movie. So in that aspect, I guess you could say it was somewhat distracting for me personally. That also just so happens to be what makes the movie kind of unique, hence why I'm kind of conflicted about it. This movie clocks in at 1 hour and 33 minutes, and it was probably the longest 1 hour and 33 minute movie that I've seen in some time. I just could not escape the feeling of boredom through long stretches of this movie. There were times where it felt like something was missing from this movie that could have potentially pushed it over the top. It is a thinking man's spy movie, but at the end of the day, I felt rather unfulfilled by what I was seeing on screen. Black Bag is a well-made movie that unfortunately I felt very little connection to, and that's exactly why I'm going to give it the Careless Sam Gerard.
I don't care!
Y'all be cool. Nah.